Hello and welcome along to a brand new episode of The Last 24, where we investigate the last known movements and events which led to the demise of some of the most famous faces ever to grace the planet. John Lennon, a man who needs no introduction, was killed on the evening of December the 8th, 1980 by a deranged, fanatical superfan whose obsession turned sour. For those who don't know, John Lennon was an English musician, songwriter and artist who shot to fame in the 1960s as one of the Beatles, the British band whose style, songs and movies left an everlasting legacy across all genres of entertainment and culture. However, despite having a massive following and alongside his wife, Yoko Ono, promoting world peace after a successful solo career, Lennon's life would be cut short in the most disturbing and public ways possible. So, without further ado, let us jump straight into today's episode of The Last 24 as we investigate the tragic death of John Lennon. To discuss Lennon's history in music, culture and time in the spotlight would warrant more than one episode on this channel, so we will cut straight to the other person involved in the megastar's death, Mark David Chapman. At that time, Chapman was a 25-year-old former security guard from Honolulu, Hawaii, who had no previous run-ins with the law or criminal convictions of any kind. Chapman was a massive fan of the Beatles as a child and had become somewhat obsessed with their rise to stardom and impact on society as a whole. However, as time went on and Lennon embarked on his solo career, performing to large crowds and endorsing peace throughout the world, Chapman's opinion of his idol became warped. He states that he became jealous of Lennon's lifestyle and outspoken opinions on war, religion and poverty, citing the 1966 comment that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus as the catalyst for his resentment and frustration. Another element of Lennon's murder was the book that Chapman had on his person at the time of his arrest. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger played a major role in the mindset and justification for Chapman's actions, as he claimed he was inspired by the fictional character Holden Caulfield. In the book, the central character claims to be a phony killer, someone who detests hypocrisy and so-called phonies. Chapman loathed the 1971 song Imagine, especially where Lennon sings, "Imagine no possessions." According to his killer, the lyrics solidified Lennon as a phony due to his success and lifestyle. To carry out the murder, Chapman purchased a Charter Arms 5-shot revolver, known as a 38 Special, on the 27th of October 1980 in Honolulu. From there, he booked a flight to New York City on the 29th of October after contacting the Federal Aviation Administration to decipher ways to transport a revolver via aeroplane. Shockingly, he was able to do so after removing the bullets from the handpiece. He left New York for a few days before returning on the 6th of December and checked himself into the Upper West Side YMCA for one night before checking into the Sheraton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Now that we know who the killer was, his motives and whereabouts before John Lennon was killed, let us now look at the key timestamps from the last 24 hours of Lennon's life, before he came face to face with the man who would take his life. Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono, had breakfast at the Café La Fortuna. It is noted that Lennon ordered his favourite dish, Eggs Benedict and a cappuccino. He then goes for a haircut in preparation for a photo shoot with Anna Lou Leibovitz, the American photographer known for her intimate celebrity portraits. Chapman was already waiting for his moment as he paced outside the entrance to the Dakota apartment complex, where Lennon lived during the early morning hours. He would act casual, talking to fellow fans and others, but would ultimately miss seeing Lennon before his morning routine. Later, Chapman spotted Lennon's family nanny, Helen Seaman, who was returning from a walk with John's 5-year-old son, Sean. According to Seaman, Chapman reached across her in an attempt to shake Sean's hand, calling him a beautiful boy, referring to his father's song, "Beautiful Boy, Darling Boy." Lennon arrives for his photo shoot, where they discuss various poses and angles. Eventually, all parties agree on Lennon being photographed nude whilst cuddling Yoko Ono, who remained clothed. The photograph would eventually end up on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine on January the 22nd, 1981. The photo shoot does not last too long, and afterwards, Lennon sits down with the music executive and radio programmer Dave Sholin for a radio interview. They discuss a variety of topics in a conversation that lasts for approximately 3 hours. During the chat, Lennon eerily states, "We're either going to live or we're going to die. I consider that my work won't be finished until I'm dead and buried, and I hope that's a long time." This would be the first encounter Lennon and Ono have with Chapman as they left the building of the interview. Chapman approaches the couple and requests Lennon to autograph a copy of his most recent album, Double Fantasy, to which he dutifully obliges. In the years that followed, Chapman would comment on his initial interaction with Lennon, stating that he was very kind to me. Ironically, very kind and was very patient with me. The limousine was waiting and he took his time with me and he got the pen going and he signed my album. He asked me if I needed anything else. I said, no sir, and he walked away. A very cordial and decent man. A haunting photograph was taken by amateur photographer Paul Gorish, who managed to get a shot of Lennon signing Chapman's album at this moment. No one would believe what would happen in the hours that followed. Lennon and Ono take a taxi to the record plant, a recording studio where they collaborate on the song Walking on Thin Ice. Celebrations are in order as they are informed by record executive David Geffen that the Double Fantasy album has reached gold status. After the celebrations at the studio have calmed down, Lennon and his wife decide to leave and head home to be with their son. Around 10:45 p.m, a limousine parks up at the entrance to the Dakota. Yoko heads straight for the lobby of the complex, while Lennon remains at the car to gather his belongings, including cassettes of the day's recordings. After collecting the equipment, Lennon looks across to see Chapman staring at him. He seems to recognize him from their earlier interaction and proceeds to walk towards the entrance. Mark David Chapman then shouts, "Mr. Lennon," before pulling out the revolver and firing 4 shots into Lennon's back. A 5th shot is also fired but misses Lennon and hits a window of the Dakota apartments. According to Chapman, he has no recollection of calling out to Lennon before firing. Lennon is now bleeding and heavily staggers up the steps towards the lobby area, where he is heard saying, I'm shot," before dropping his cassette and falling to the floor. As this is happening, Jose Perdomo, the doorman to the Dakota, manages to get in front of Chapman and shakes the gun out of his hand and kicks it across the road. Jay Hastings, a concierge, attempts to aid Lennon by ripping part of his shirt in hope of making a tourniquet, but after noticing the extent of the injuries, places his jacket over him and calls for the police. Surprisingly, Chapman remains motionless and undeterred by his actions, removing his coat and hat to show that he was not carrying any more weapons, as he seems to be waiting for the police to arrive. Perdomo shouts to Chapman, "Do you know what you just did?" To which he calmly replies, "I just shot John Lennon." Police officers Stephen Spiro and Peter Cullen were the first to arrive at the scene. They were at 72nd Street and Broadway when they heard a report of shots fired. Upon arrival, they noticed Chapman standing on 72nd Street reading a paperback copy of his favourite book, The Catcher in the Rye. The officers handcuffed the killer and placed him in the back seat of their car. It is reported that Chapman did not resist arrest in the slightest, with Officer Cullen recalling, "He apologised to us for ruining our night." Officers Herb Frauenberger and Tony Palmer arrived on the scene next. Lennon is still alive at this point, although he is lying face down on the floor of the lobby with blood oozing from his mouth. Fellow officers James Moran and Bill Gamble arrived shortly after. Due to the urgency of the situation, Frauenberger places Lennon in Moran and Gamble's squad car as they cannot afford to wait for an ambulance. Moran and Gamble drive Lennon to Roosevelt Hospital on West 59th Street, with Frauenberger and Palmer following behind with Yoko Ono. According to Officer Gamble, Moran asked, "Are you John Lennon?" Lennon nods and whispers the word "yes" before falling unconscious. Just before 11 p.m, Moran arrived at Roosevelt Hospital and carried Lennon on his back towards an available gurney, shouting for a doctor. Having lost consciousness en route to the hospital, Lennon had no pulse and was not breathing. 3 doctors were ordered to oversee Lennon, along with a nurse and 3 other attendants. They attempted to resuscitate the superstar for approximately 15 minutes before cutting his chest open and performing a resuscitative thoracotomy to restore his circulation. Unfortunately, this attempted last resort did not work, as the procedure revealed that too much damage had been done to the blood vessels above and around Lennon's heart. 3 of the 4 bullets that struck Lennon's back passed completely through his body and out of his chest, while the 4th lodged itself in his aorta beside his heart. One of the exciting bullets from his chest hit and became lodged in his upper left arm. Each bullet had ruptured vital arteries around the heart. Stephen Lynn, head of the emergency department at Roosevelt Hospital, was credited with the attempts to save Lennon's life. In 2005, Lynn claimed to have massaged Lennon's heart and attempted to resuscitate him for 20 minutes. Meanwhile, Richard Marks, an emergency room surgeon at the hospital, stated in 1990 that he operated on Lennon and administered a massive blood transfusion and also provided the heart massage. He stated that, "When I realised he wasn't going to make it, I just sewed him back up. I felt helpless." The actual account of what happened in the hospital is the subject of scrutiny and dispute. David Halloran, who had been a 3rd-year general surgery resident at Roosevelt at the time, rejects both Marks and Lynn's version of events. In an interview in 2015, Halloran claims that the doctors didn't do anything and that they only got involved when they heard that the victim was John Lennon. Lennon was pronounced dead on arrival at 11:15 p.m, according to his death certificate. His body was escorted to the city morgue at 520 First Avenue for a scheduled autopsy. The cause of death was concluded and stated on his death certificate as hypervolemic shock caused by the loss of more than 80% of blood volume due to multiple through-and-through gunshot wounds to the left shoulder and left chest, resulting in damage to the left lung, the left subclavian artery, and both the aorta and aortic arch. Still rallying from the shock and distress of the events that had just transpired, Yoko Ono requested that the staff from Roosevelt Hospital not report Lennon's death to the press until she had informed her son, Sean. She stated that he would probably be watching television and didn't want him to learn of his father's death from a TV news headline. Unfortunately for Ono, news producer Alan J. Weiss of WABC-TV was also in the hospital awaiting treatment after being injured in an earlier motorcycle accident. When officers wheeled Lennon into the same room as the producer, he called his station and passed on the news, which was then broadcast to the world by Howard Cosell during an episode of ABC's Monday Night Football.
Yes, we have to say it. Remember, this is just a football game, no matter who wins or loses. An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival.
After Lennon was declared dead, Dr. Lynn claimed that Yoko responded by crying out hysterically, "You're lying. It can't be true. He's not dead. I don't believe you," and hitting her head against the hospital floor. This account is disputed by Ono, as well as 2 nurses who were present at the time. She was later escorted from the hospital by a police officer and David Geffen. The next morning, Ono issued the following statement: "There is no funeral for John. Later in the week, we will set the time for a silent vigil to pray for his soul. We invite you to participate from wherever you are at the time. John loved and prayed for the human race. Please pray the same for him. Love, Yoko and Sean." George Harrison would follow up with a statement for the press. "After all we went through together, I had and still have great love and respect for him. I am shocked and stunned. To rob a life is the ultimate robbery in life. The perpetual encroachment on other people's space is taken to the limit with the use of a gun. It is an outrage that people can take other people's lives when they obviously haven't got their own lives in order. Paul McCartney then emerged from his home in Sussex to address the reporters by stating, "I can't take it at the moment. John was a great man who will be remembered for his unique contributions to art, music and peace. He's going to be missed by the whole world." Ringo Starr, who was in the Bahamas at the time, received a phone call from his stepchildren informing him about the murder. He immediately flew to New York to help and offer his condolences to Ono and Sean. Lennon's remains were cremated at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York, and his ashes were scattered in Central Park, near the Dakota apartment complex. Chapman was taken to the NYPD's 20th precinct on West 82nd Street, where he was questioned for 8 hours before being brought to New York County Criminal Court on Central Street in Lower Manhattan. A judge remanded Chapman to Bellevue Hospital for psychiatric evaluation. He would eventually be charged with second-degree murder, as premeditation in New York State was not deemed enough to upgrade to first-degree murder. Chapman's lawyers pleaded with him to claim insanity, but he calmly pleaded guilty to Lennon's murder and was sentenced to 20 years to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole in 2000. Addressing the court, Chapman read a passage from The Catcher in the Rye, his favourite book. As of March 2024, Chapman has been denied parole 13 times and remains incarcerated at Greenhaven Correctional Facility. And so we come to the end of yet another tragic case here on The Last 24. There is no doubt that John Lennon's legacy will remain forever etched in culture, art, music, and the ongoing search for world peace. Whether one listened to his music as part of the Fab Four or followed his solo endeavours and campaigned for universal love, it is safe to say that Lennon was a trailblazer on a number of fronts. Much like David Bowie, Prince, and other superstars, we must always remember the man himself and not his death. As for Chapman, perhaps it is best he remains incarcerated for everyone's safety, as well as his own. We hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, folks.